stream.
Of course, of course.
So technically,
yeah, so you can
you're
start
on
it.
the air, but the show has not started.
Right.
Okay, now
Right.
I'm going to get the link,
Okay.
and I'm going to send it to that 4-person chat.
So
I feel
then
like
we'll
I'm
all
in some
have it.
sort of like survivalist bunker or something.
Well, we will survive.
Yeah.
We're going to get there.
Right.
Yep.
If anyone's out there.
Yeah, zombie apocalypse. This is
Right.
where we get
And it's so funny what you said, though, that's where you know each other from. Yeah, that's great. So, and of course, I couldn't resist pulling this out and bringing this with me. So I was starting to say that India's going to be at, oh, can you come to Riverside, Salem on the 16th?
No,
Oh, you can't. Oh, okay.
I have to be in the Bronx.
Oh, okay. Well, never mind. That's fine. That's fine. Because that's why I put it out as a conversation. So whoever comes, comes. And unfortunately, it won't be you. But I'm glad you're here now. and
Vicky,
we're
show
here now.
India how to adjust her volume. For
Am
both.
I-
Okay. So if you want to adjust your volume,
I'm the blue one.
you're the blue one.
Am I too loud or too low?
And-
That's up to you. What do you say?
Oh, I think I sound fine.
And
Okay.
then the other thing is about where your mic is. Is her mic?
Yeah.
I think it looks a little close, but if it sounds fine, then it should be. They said like 4.
It sounds fine to me, but
Yeah, it sounds
my voice
good.
tends to carry.
I
Oh, that
liked
looks
it
good.
when it was a little closer.
Okay. So it may depend
Excellent.
on, yeah, other factors. I always think like the 4 inches thing. But, yeah, no, that, if it works, it works. We're glad.
Okay, Facebook is giving me the link. They have given me the link. I'm going to now send it to you.
Wonderful. Very good.
Okay, the link has been sent to all 4
Great.
people. If anybody wants to share it, now is the time.
Wonderful. That's what I'm doing. Okay. And okay.
Well, let me know when everybody's all shared up.
I'm good.
Okay, everybody else?
Yep.
Mhm.
I'm good.
Okay, you see the timer in the center of the screen?
Mm-hmm.
When it says on the air, you are on the air. Okay, here we go.
Welcome to Talking Peace with the Western New York Peace Center, being recorded here at Think Twice Radio in the home of the future. Also the home of our friend and producer, Richard Wicca. Thanks, Richard. And thank you, too, to our friends at WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative radio station coming out of Buff State University. Thank you, WBNY. While I think of thankfulness, I do think of our indigenous friends and people of color in general. First, I think of how between the indigenous lands being taken through trickery, violence, and near massacre, and I think about enslaved people that were brought here and still, in chains and into enslavement, and yet people are still thankful and still remembering, as the indigenous people do, open everything with this thankfulness and also with acknowledgement of our ancestors. So the thankfulness for Mother Earth, for the plants and animals, for all the elements of creation, in the skies, the heavens, the stars and everything. And then they say, often either Ashe, or if it's indigenous people say the Haudenosaunee, whose land we're on right now, the Seneca, say Nyahweh, and then the people say Nyo. So Nyahweh.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm very thankful for our special guests that we have here for a really important conversation. First, we're celebrating Daniel Ellsberg Week, and part of that is we'll be going out to Northrop Grumman to notify them of their illegal activity in case they are just not aware. But in the meanwhile, so we have people who are involved in all different parts of that. So I think I'll start with Joe, because in the Haudenosaunee way, I get stuck on this thing of going counterclockwise. So Joe Hall is here. He's a researcher and did a lot of research on this topic, and is also with Jewish Voice for Peace as a professor. And we're so glad you're here, Joe.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And then we have India Walton, who is well known in this community for all kinds of reasons, and not the least of them being, besides being the elected, the nominated, the Democratic nominee for mayor, and has still done so much work in the political sphere. But she's also the senior organizer at Roots Action, and also Progressive Hub. So we're so grateful for all the work you're doing, India.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, we're so glad. And last but not least, Derek Seidman, who is also a researcher and author who has written for Common Dreams. And
Truth Out.
Truth Out. Truth Out. I'm always making that mistake. Truth Out. And Little Sis, of course, is very big, and that'll show on some of the information you can share with us. And also very stalwart member of Jewish Voice for Peace. So thanks for coming, Derek.
Thank you.
And I'm Victory Ross. I am a social worker, and I'm the daughter of a German Jew Holocaust survivor who's passed away now, but who had to leave. I love to talk about my dad, so I won't go on too long, but just that he had to leave as a 15-year-old in 1933 because he was speaking truth to power. So I think that's a great lead-in to talking about Daniel Ellsberg and what we want to do at Northrop Grumman and what we want to do in general here in this beloved community. So if what we like to start out with talking about our values, and so Joe, if you want to just say, when we think about Daniel Ellsberg or think about this Northrop Grumman accountability rally or whatever we want to call it, when you think about those topics, that truth to power, what are some of the values that you think of?
Yeah, I mean, I think of justice, accountability, and transparency. I think Daniel Ellsberg, his work was critical in regard to creating accountability for the war crimes during the Vietnam War. And when we think about this Northrop Grumman action, they're supplying Israel with a wide variety of weapons, including missile systems, including F-35s, which have been used for the bombardment of Gaza. And yet there's been no accountability for their role in supplying these weapons of mass death. And they're right in our community. And so I think of the value of justice and accountability, and how do we hold organizations like this account, which are responsible for contributing to mass death and the genocide of Palestinians.
Thanks so much, Joe. Absolutely. Very powerful, everything you said, and certainly accountability and justice figuring very prominently, and transparency. That's another thing. So thank you for those. India, what would you say?
Yeah, I echo Joe's sentiments, about justice and accountability and transparency, but I also think a lot about peace. I think about my children and my future grandchildren, and I think from the perspective of a Buffalonian, and just as a person who grew up in times of peace at home, right, and not thinking about the effects and the impacts that war has on people, I think about Norman's book, War Made Invisible. And I think because we have not experienced that type of violence and devastation, that sometimes we feel like it's not our problem. And I think that this action that's coming up is a key indicator that these weapons and these tools of devastation and of sadness and of peril are being produced right in our own backyards, and we have a responsibility to speak up about it.
Thanks so much, India. Ben, thank you for bringing up Norman Salmon. Just was a couple of weeks ago he was on the show with that wonderful book, War Made Invisible. So thank you, and thank you for saying it is so relevant to us here in Western New York, and really, the fact that it's made invisible doesn't it very real effects on all of us. So Derek?
Yeah, just to add to what's already been said, when I think of Daniel Ellsberg, I think of really his tremendous courage.
Yes.
And how he sort of serves as a kind of model. I mean, he, in leaking the Pentagon Papers, was prepared to go to jail for the rest of his life to try to end the Vietnam War. And I think we're seeing right now people all over. I mean, I'm thinking about, students on campus who have been organizing the encampments and who have been being repressed, being harassed. They're risking a lot. They, in my eyes, they're heroes. They're a conscience of the nation right now. And just thinking about what Ellsberg did and what he was willing to do in his courage, and also just the refusal to become habituated to the horrors and the carnage that are happening, right in front of your eyes. I think that's something that I think is really important to remember right now as we see everything happening in Palestine.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thank you for also, what you're saying. I know you've been doing some work about Daniel Ellsberg. We were talking about it before the show, and it's so great to have you on the show to talk about that. I will say the same thing I usually think about: unarmed truth and unconditional love. How Dr. King said, that unarmed truth and unconditional love would have the final word. And Daniel Ellsberg was very much a picture of that. So he spoke the truth. Everything he shared, he revealed the truth, that was being hidden, and being hidden even from people who were working right on it. And the tremendous love that he had for people and for the world, really, to save us and try and save us from all the carnage and all the horror that was going on. And courage being, starts with the French word of cœur, of heart, that he had the heart that had so much love that brought him to risk his own freedom and really lifelong freedom. Thank God he did have his freedom. So, and we continue on to be such a wonderful icon for every justice and peace community. So, we're thinking about Daniel Ellsberg, and so if we can move on to a little bit about Northrop Grumman and some of the war-making activities that are going on around here. And I think it's very easy to sort of hand it over to you, Joe, to some of the work, the research that you've done, that you can, just lay it out for us. Like, what is Northrop Grumman doing? And you can, there are some other entities in Western New York. What are the illegal acts that they're doing? What are the acts, let's say, and the products?
Okay, yeah, I'll try to move from the big picture and then ground it locally. But since the beginning of the founding of the State of Israel, the United States has provided over $300 billion in aid. The majority of that has been military aid that comes in the form of grants, which must be spent on U.S. weapons companies. Since October 7th, there have been over 100 military sales to Israel. And Northrop Grumman has been one of the companies that an enormous amount of weapons have been purchased from. So Northrop Grumman has a facility at 17 Worley Drive in Buffalo.
1740.
1740
Right.
Worley Drive, Buffalo, New York. Yeah, and if we think about, the weapons that Northrop Grumman produces, there's the Apache helicopter. It's an attack helicopter. It's been deployed by the Israeli military in Gaza in southern Lebanon. It's equipped with Hellfire missiles and guns that are capable of an incredible rate of fire. I mean, these are devastating, killing machines. There were well-documented reports in 2014 about the use of these helicopters. In one report of Hellfire missiles killing 51 people, including 24 children, and injuring at least 66 others, including 36 children, an incident that the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights identified as a direct attack against civilian objects or civilians, a war crime under international criminal law. And, these helicopters have been used extensively, again, in Gaza in the present conflict. And Israel has requested more Apache helicopters, which would, be partially supplied by Northrop Grumman and which would profit this company. They also are instrumental in regard to the F-35 warplane and bomber. The F-35 plays an enormous role in Israel's bombardment of Gaza historically. So in 2021, the Israeli Air Force deployed 80 fighter jets, including F-35s, to carry out waves of airstrikes across the Gaza Strip. They continue to use these aircraft to bomb the Gaza Strip now. And if we think about the level of destruction, block after block of civilian infrastructure, homes, universities and hospitals brought down by the bombs dropped from these planes, these have a direct link to Northrop Grumman. And so they are supplying the weapons and tools that are being used to commit what the International Court of Justice has said is reasonable to consider a genocide. And they're right in our backyard. We also have Moog in East Aurora and Elma. They are also do work on the F-35, as well as the M-SHORAD, which is a treaded vehicle that has equipped with a machine gun and a 30 millimeter cannon. So a lot of people think of Moog as sort of a hometown company and they're not really aware of its defense industry activities, but they're producing weapons that are designed to kill people, and have contracts with, sales with Israel. And I guess the other one, I don't want to go through all these grisly details, but
sure.
Lockheed Martin also has a facility in Niagara Falls. Again, they work on the M35 and several other weapons of destruction. Yeah.
Right. No, they're way up there in terms of activity, illegal activity. India, do you have what's your reaction to, I know a lot of that are things that you've already heard, some of which anyway.
I wasn't aware of the extent of local involvement in the supplying of weapons to Israel to perform, this ethnic cleansing in Palestine and in Gaza. And it's sad to me that there has not been more of a reaction and a resistance locally to these facilities existing in our community.
Well, thanks. It's back to what you said before, war made invisible. So people just go to their work, they sort of keep the blinders on that the community does the same. So we all know Northrop Grumman is a war profiteer. Lockheed Martin, slam dunk. Moog, I thought they made speakers as well. They might, but anyway, and Derek, what's your reaction to, I know you know a lot about that already too, so what would you like to add or focus on?
I think it's, alarming how much, right before people's eyes, maybe without even knowing it, Buffalo is really kind of embedded in this war machine. And Joe might be able to talk about this more, but if you look at sort of, for example, the board of directors of MUG, you have people that are all, spread throughout the sort of Buffalo power elite. But also just taking a step back, these corporations are there's so much money involved. Northrop Grumman, it's the third biggest defense or weapons producer in the world. In 2022, it made over $36 billion in revenue. Its CEO, her name is Kathy Warden. From 2020 to 2022, she raked in over $60 million in compensation. And then on top of that, if you read their quarterly releases, every quarter, their stock buybacks, paying out dividends. So it's the big Wall Street investors, too, that are also profiting from this. The BlackRocks, the Fidelities, the JP Morgans, these are all their very biggest shareholders. And Lockheed Martin, they're the world's #1 weapons producer. And incidentally, when talking about the student encampments, Columbia, where it really got started, one of the trustees at Columbia is Jay Johnson, who's the former Homeland Secretary for Obama.
Oh,
he's
right.
also on the board of Lockheed Martin. So when they're drawing the connections between, the war machine and what it's doing in Gaza, and how that's connected to their own university power structures, university investments, it's a really close connection.
Wow. Yes, that is a really close connection. And it brings me to mind one of the other things we were going to talk about. So really two things, but to start off with the Merchants of Death Tribunal. So Kathy Kelly and Brad Wolf, who's on the show, both of them have been on Talking Peace before. Brad Wolf very recently about this Merchants of Death War Tribunal, which is all about, they've been doing this for about a year. They got a tribunal together of international law experts and other, qualified people to make a judgment after they get the evidentiary videos. So they've been making these evidentiary videos pretty much, I think it's one a week or something like that. But so they've got just oodles of videos with the proof of the war profiteering, of just what you're saying. So first of all, there's the war element, there's the amount of destruction, and then there's the amount of profitability. So when we say, it's not just about, what's going on in Israel and Palestine, or the people's feelings, or what's, the history, it's also about the money is coming in. And so sometimes I call it Fear Inc., which is all the efforts to control, intimidate, incarcerate, and even kill. And that would be also could be known as the military, industrial, congressional, media, contractor. You could throw in there the police and because it's everyone behind a gun. It's all the fear thing. They get the money, and so the Merchants of Death. They didn't throw in the sheriffs and the carceral system and everything, which I sometimes do. But let's just stick with the Merchants of Death. But they are raking in the dough, and you just said, there it's cha-ching, cha-ching right now between what's going on in Ukraine, what's the devastation in Gaza. and meanwhile, the stock market is zooming. Now, it has been mentioned to me that might not be the only reason it is, but still, that is one big prop up, that they are raking in the dough. So please, Joe.
Yeah, so, just a couple of things to say about that. I mean, Moog reported in a 2023 sales call that their sales in space and defense increased 11% to $241 million due to a higher demand for defense products, right, which means weapons. And thinking about where money is going, right? Mm-hmm. So an enormous amount of money is being used to, every time we give aid to a country like Israel, again, just let me emphasize, that is earmarked to go to purchase of U.S. weapons. So it's a direct subsidy of the U.S. weapons industry of billions of dollars. And so if we think about if we subsidized economies of care to that scale as opposed to economies of death, things would look really differently. And so it makes me very concerned that so much of our local economy is invested in this economy of death.
Yeah, I just had an aha moment. So for quite a while, I had been racking my brain trying to figure out what interest AIPAC had in the congressional seat that was held by Brian Higgins, right? Mm-hmm. It's like a plus 10 Democratic seat. It's not at risk of being overtaken by, so like, Congressman Kennedy is essentially unopposed. Like, why would AIPAC be pouring money? Why would they be involved in this race? And now it's all making so much sense, and like, it's scary, right? Because this is the economy, right, that someone has to ensure that this monster continues to be fed, and that's what we're doing. And now my mind is just absolutely blown. It's even worse than I thought it was.
Yes. No, you're so right. No, that is exactly. Derek? I mean,
as JVP, we are firmly support the whole Reject AIPAC campaign, and I'm really shocked that Kennedy is accepting money and the endorsement of AIPAC. I mean, if you look who actually are the biggest donors to AIPAC, like who really is driving it, I mean, it's all, the biggest donors are a bunch of far-right billionaires so for example, I've been doing some research on this recently. The fourth biggest donor to AIPAC right now, his name's Bernie Marcus. He's the founder of Home Depot. He just gave $1 million to Trump. He funds all kinds of union busting, kind of AstroTurf outfits, a bunch of kind of organizations that are in the Coke money, Coke donor network, orbit. The fifth biggest donor to their political efforts, to their big super PAC, his name's Paul Singer. He's a hedge fund billionaire. Same thing, donates to the whole, donates to Trump. I think he gave, I forget the exact amount, but huge amount of money to Trump's inaugural. And, you can go on and on. And, I mean, this really shows how AIPAC is part of this kind of reactionary nexus that's on the one hand, it's supporting, this, occupation and apartheid and genocide in Palestine, while at the same time it's, being, funded by these forces that are trying to crush progressive Democrats in the U.S., that are, funding all types of other reactionary causes that are enemies of the labor movement, that are enemies of, progressive change in the U.S. So, I mean, really, I don't understand how someone like Kennedy, who says he's going to Congress to take on MAGA, right, is going to take money from this really reactionary group that, by the way, is funded by people who are also bankrolling MAGA.
Right.
And the thing that kills me, right, is like none of this is about values, right? We've made it into this sort of this identity and about values and things. This is about money. Like
Right.
at the end of the day, like they're moving chess pieces on the board in the form of politicians and elected officials and even celebrities, right, who are choosing a side, and it's about keeping the money rolling in. And meanwhile, it is the folks like us, right, in the words of Uncle Bernie Sanders, the 99% who are getting crushed under the weight of it. And you know, I'm hoping that the campus organizing and just the conversations that are being had and the visibility of the tragedy that's happening in Palestine is really going to help us build and raise a class consciousness so that we stop differentiating ourselves between progressives and moderates. We are all getting crapped on in this situation. And meanwhile, while we're suffering here at home economically and financially, there are children and women and innocent civilians dying and all over the world. And it's just, sometimes it's hard to even want to continue to fight, because it seems like it's such a long road to get any type of justice. But yeah,
it's so hard, and it's so clear as we're talking about it. I mean, all I can think of, one of the biggest things, I actually studied economics. The biggest thing I got out of it was opportunity cost. The opportunity cost of what you do is the things, we were just talking about that, the things that you didn't do because you did the things you did do. Well, and the same with money. You know, where the money goes means that money didn't go to people's needs. So instead, all of this munitions, that to keep that war machine going, they need to use the munitions. You know, and don't get us started about the doomsday machine and the nuclear, which is not what we're really talking about right now, but we will talk some more about this in future. But back to it sucks all the money out of and takes it away from people's needs and breaks our own laws. So that's the other thing, is that all of this is illegal. So there's 6 different laws that are being broken, and I really want to focus in on what you said about the fact that when we give people foreign aid or give countries foreign aid, that supposedly we're giving them aid, we are giving, money to our arms industry for them, because that's what, I don't know what the exact percentage is. Do you know what the percentage is? It's a very large preponderance of the money that's so-called foreign aid is a direct subsidy of our military-industrial complex, which is the biggest in the world. We are number one. We are number one with guns. We are number one with nuclear weapons. We are number one arms merchants. We spend more on arms than the next, well, I've heard different numbers of 8 to 10 countries. But then if you take those, most of those are allies. Many of those are allies. And then the rest of the countries, those are small countries that don't have much of a military budget. So it's just back to, the greatest purveyor of violence in the world is my own government. So these 6 laws all say that we are not allowed to subsidize, and no country, the U.S. government is not allowed to permit companies to sell arms to countries that are credibly accused of war crimes. So, Joe.
Well, I'm certainly not an expert on international law, but just the few things I can say is that I think that accounts for why the current administration has worked so hard to try to discredit the United Nations and the International Court, and to ignore the ruling that what is happening is plausibly genocide, because the writing's on the wall. I mean, what is, the vast plurality of countries in the UN are on board with finding what Israel is doing as tantamount to war crimes.
Absolutely.
And I'll just say a couple other things. I mean, this preceded October 7th. If we look at the Dahia doctrine that the Israeli military employs, It means using disproportionate force on civilian infrastructure anytime there's an attack on Israel. So it is policy. It is Israeli military policy to attack civilian targets. And when we're thinking about a place like Gaza, which is one of the most densely populated places on the earth, there is no attacking civilian infrastructure without killing. Gratuitous. I mean, every death is gratuitous, but without killing so many civilians. And so to ignore these laws, I mean, is you know, like there's no question that they're being violated, and to ignore them is just the height of cynicism. And you know, and there is precedent. So a Dutch court in February, for a brief moment, ruled that they had to stop exporting parts for the F-35 plane, given its extensive use in bombardments in Gaza Strip, right? So, so judiciaries and you know, quote unquote progressive countries, you know, there is precedent for saying, yes, these companies cannot do what they're doing because it is materially aiding genocide.
Well, I just have to insert at this point that one of the things, you know, when I attend Temple Beth Zion, and I've talked with a lot of people, a lot of Jewish people, about what is going on. And first of all, I think that they don't really necessarily know, or they may not want to know, because the news that they get out of Israel is very different. Now, we also know that the first casualty of war is truth. So there's just a bunch of lies. It's just like, you know, in Nazi Germany, you know, the Germans either when they didn't know or they didn't want to know, you know, so they just fed a line and they just like ignore the rest because they don't want to know, because then you have to do something, or you might feel that you have to do something about it. So international law, I did actually study international law, and also Veterans for Peace came out with this list of these 6 laws that are being broken. And as you pointed out also, as all of you have pointed out at different points, it's not new. This is not new that there are war crimes going on. If you see a graph of the number killed by Hamas or Palestinians, the number of Israelis killed versus the number of you know, the respective losses on each side, you see that Israel, just for every 1 death, there'll be another 10. For every 1 death of someone in Gaza, of someone in Israel, then the Israeli military will kill, you know, 10 times as many people or more. You know, just some, and there are laws. One of them is about international law. That's not in the 6 laws that are broken. That's in the in the Geneva Conventions, that proportionality is a rule. You know, you cannot kill 10 people for every 1 person killed. You cannot go after civilians. They go after civilians. The only other thing I needed to say is that when people, you know, one time I made some real progress with somebody who doesn't really see it the same way as me, when I started to talk about the greatest purveyor of violence in the world is my own government. So it's not like we think, oh, Israel's the only one doing something wrong. No, we have been doing war crimes in Afghanistan, in you know, in a place certainly in Iraq, you know, in many places, obviously and covertly doing all kinds of war crimes. So, and everything we just said about the arms manufacturers. So anyway, I just want to turn it over. What would you say, India, in terms of your reaction to all of that?
I'll keep going back to the words of the great late Tupac. We have money for wars, but can't feed the poor, right? Like we are okay with socialism when it comes to the slaughtering of innocent civilians, but when it comes to economies of care and making sure that people are fed and sheltered and living thriving lives, you know, then the conversation becomes, well, where does the money come from? I think that folks know that, like, this is our money. These are our taxpayer dollars that are going to fund this genocide. It's not a war. And I also just want to emphasize that not all Palestinians are Hamas.
Right.
I live in the United States of America, and I'm not in the army.
Right.
So to associate an entire nation of people with one group who has committed heinous acts, we can admit that, right? But to use that as a blanket for the decimation of an entire nation of people and its infrastructure is unacceptable, it's immoral, and it's unjust.
You're so right. You're so right. Derek?
Yeah, I just thought India made some just really fantastic points.
Yes.
And I guess I'd add, what you said, Vicki. I mean, you mentioned, the U.S. is the greatest purveyor of violence. I get annoyed when this is called, the Israeli war, the Israeli siege on Gaza or on Palestine, because I think it should be called it should always be called the U.S.-backed Israeli war on Gaza, or even just the U.S.-Israeli war on Gaza.
Right.
The U.S. is and all of the federal politicians who are voting for this and upholding this are utterly complicit and responsible in enabling the genocide that's happening. And also, I guess to India's point about not all Palestinians are Hamas. I mean, the whole Hamas, Israel is like always talking about Hamas as this is the reason that they need to be doing all this. And just bracket that for a second. Look at the West Bank. Hamas doesn't exist in any meaningful way in the West Bank.
Right.
And we know that for years, for decades, Israel has been settling the land. Settlers have been, with the support of the Israeli government. I think last year was the most deadly year for Palestinians in the West Bank. Hundreds of deaths. And if you go, I recommend everybody go look at the most, storied human rights group within Israel, B'Tselem. You can Google it. Look at their human rights reports. Not only do they say that Israel is using starvation as a weapon of war in Gaza and that's a war crime, and that's their human rights group, but they also have report after report about horrific land grabs, violence, killings, displacements, settlers on the West Bank just going and throwing people out of their homes, killing people, sending them to the hospital. And this is all happening with the tacit and sometimes active approval of the military and far-right members of the government. So I think that if Hamas disappeared tomorrow, these types of things would still be going on. Not to downplay that, but just to make that point that this goes, I think, to the core of what Israel is trying to do in terms of displacing Palestinians.
Right. Well, I want to thank you for that, because that is a very important point. And certainly the U.S. has been such an enabler. So Northrop Grumman and the weapons are part of it, and they're only part of it. There's been, in the Security Council, time after time, and the not recognizing the ICC or, all the ways that the U.S. is not interested in international law. And as you said, downplaying the UN, fault finding with the UN consistently over the years, back to not wanting to be held accountable, not wanting the transparency, not wanting to admit to everything that you were that all of us have been saying here. So maybe this is the time to talk a little bit about the action at Northrop Grumman. So on June 12th, Wednesday, June 12th at 1 o'clock, we're going out to Northrop Grumman to just hand them something that lists these 6 laws that are being violated, that our government should be stopping them from doing it. So in other words, not funding those the munitions that they're sending, is an illegal act. So our government, and actually I should give Veterans for Peace full credit that not only did they put together that list of 6 laws that are being violated, but we also went, with the Western New York Peace Center as ally to Veterans for Peace. A number of us went to the U.S. Passport Office the other a few weeks ago, maybe. Anyway, to notify them. Of course, we couldn't get in the door. They say you need an appointment before you can, you know how they do, And actually, they do say that even if you're looking for your passport. You have to have an appointment. You can't come in. But anyway, to just notify that they are also breaking the law. Our government, once again, breaking the law. So this is civil resistance. And so we're not. So we went there, and we may go back again. But we'll be going to Northrop Grumman on June 12th at 1 p.m. to notify them that they are also breaking the law and breaking these 6 laws. And people are welcome to come. They can park. You can park on a side street or something like that. I guess I can say that. And it's perfectly legal because there is a sidewalk and people are allowed to be on that sidewalk, and you're allowed to be on there with signs. The police could say that people need to keep moving or sort of go in a circle or something. As long as people are not blocking other people, not blocking traffic, it is perfectly legal. So a small contingent will go actually with a document to the door to let them know, and just notify them that they are breaking these laws and they're doing illegal acts, and to I don't know, suggest, demand. I don't know what the right word is going to be, because I don't think we're going to actually shut down the plant right then, but that they do need to cease and desist. Now, whether they will or not, that's another question, but people are welcome to come, and so I'd like each of you to just, if you have something to share about your thoughts about this, doing this, and especially in Daniel Ellsberg week. So, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I think Daniel Ellsberg is, his actions were about shining a light on the sort of things we didn't know existed and we wouldn't want done in our name. Mm-hmm. And I think that this is a way to understand how, that there are, locations in our communities where things that are happening, we wouldn't want them in our name. And so I think showing up is a way to remind ourselves that these nodes of the military-industrial complex exist in our communities. This, this profiteering off of mass death, has its local, its local site. And so I think making these demands and making that real to ourselves is a really important act. And at this point, anything one can do to throw sand in the gears of the war machine is a good thing.
Thanks. Yeah. Are you going to be able to come, you think?
Yeah, I think I will.
Oh, good. That'll be so wonderful. India?
Yeah, I think that I echo everything that Joe said. Power concedes nothing without a demand.
Right.
And I think that in the moment that we are in now, it is so dire and so urgent that we must make more demands. We must make more demands, not only of these private corporations, but of our politicians and elected officials,
right.
Of our neighbors,
right.
of our families and friends. Like you said, you talking to people at Temple, right? Like organizing starts with our own people, right? Like I'm doing education with my family because there are some people, even in my community, who don't see the connection between what's happening in Palestine and what has happened to people of color and what's happening to people of color all over the world. So we have to start somewhere, and we have to be durable and have some stamina to make sure that we keep pressing.
Amen. Amen. I mean, Ashe. Yeah, so true. And Derek, what would you?
I'm all about follow the money.
Right.
So I think it's important and powerful to find the institutions, find the actors, find the places and spaces where the profiteering is going on, and doing the research and the work to figure out who's connected to that, who's propping it up, who's benefiting from it. And I think there's been great appeal in this movement that we've seen arise over the past several months, to not just calling out and trying to pressure politicians or engage in mass protests, but also to find out who is making the weapons, who's making the loans, who are the shareholders, who are the board members, and so on and so on. So I think it's essential to do actions like this that kind of employ that strategy of like really getting, naming, who, what, when, where is involved in war profiteering.
Well, everything that you've shared just now and also before in terms of the it's all the little sis stuff about where what's happening with the money, looking behind the curtain, to what is really going on financially, politically. It's so valuable and so important in people understanding. And that's where I'm going to remind people about the Merchants of Death Tribunal, which is coming towards the end of they've gotten a lot of information. I mean, an overwhelming amount of information about all these war profiteers. And they focused on a number of them. They didn't pick Northrop Grumman for some reason, it's sort of maybe who was like nearby that they would, because they've had people go out and do what we're doing. So we'll be doing, this as a co-sponsor of the Merchants of Death Tribunal, and just as allies and partners with them in this, trying to help people understand that it's also that going on. And what they're doing, I need to mention this too, is about trauma. Mm-hmm. Because when we can't forget that, I can't forget, as the daughter of a German Jew, there's a reason I'm a social worker, and that is a lot of it, is because people were traumatized, and Jewish people are highly traumatized because there was Babylon and then Egypt and then the Romans and the Christians and the pogroms and the Nazis, and it's been a long time. So traumatized people often behave badly, not always, but it's one of the things that's feeding this. And that goes for Jewish people in this country too. And they don't want to know. So never again is now. I just can't say that enough. And part of what helps people to understand is when they look at these evidentiary videos of the Merchants of Death Tribunal. So you just go to merchantsofdeath.org. You can see there's a whole trove of the evidence, video evidence, and then they'll be having a gathering, to maybe discuss it, and then all of the tribunal is going to make their own judgment, which I think it won't be very shocking what they might decide. But anyway, so just be aware that'll be coming, and maybe we'll have a watch party or something like that. I would love to have the three of you who have so much to offer on this topic, these and many topics, but particularly this one, which is so vital to our very existence, because all of our issues are connected. Mm-hmm. And this is one of them. So we're coming towards the end of our time a little bit. So I think we have about, let's say, 6 or 7 more minutes. And I'd just like to have you each sort of wind up, like, especially with the handles for work, so what you feel about all of this and what you'd like to see people do, or how people could help or get more involved is part of it. Along with just your final thoughts for now. Mm-hmm. So, Joe?
Okay. All right, I'll try to move from final thoughts and feelings to action. But when you mentioned trauma, I mean, it just sort of crossed my mind, a story I'd read recently about the bombings in Rafah, where a number of teens who were receiving treatment for their traumatization at having survived previous bombings were killed in the latest round of bombings. And so just thinking of these cycles of traumatization and re-traumatization, it's almost unfathomable. And so I think we are witnessing a historic moment in terms of the violence that is being inflicted upon an entire people. And it's important for us to not be overwhelmed by that and to think, what can we do? Nothing you do will seem perfect. Nothing you do singly will change the outcome of what's going on, but collectively, you know, the accumulation of all these actions in the spheres that you can act can make a difference, and we owe it to act, because we are already invested through our institutions, through, you know, our, you know, trust funds and things like that, you know, our retirement funds. We're already invested in this war, and so I think we have a debt to pay. And so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of I'll end there. But yeah, do what you can. Do what you can. Anything you can.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, you know, to your point, no action is insignificant. And do what you can, and then a little bit more. I think that the blessing of comfort is meant for us to be able to give of our time, talent, treasure, in order to make a difference. So if you're a little bit too comfortable, maybe volunteer an extra hour, attend another action, find a way to get involved. And the other things I just wanted to highlight is that there's a fairly recent body of research out dealing with epigenetics, and it talks about how trauma actually alters the DNA of people who've experienced it. So, you know, the trauma of what we're experiencing now, even as onlookers and witnesses to this, let alone what is going to happen, you know, to folks who have experienced it for themselves, is going to be long lasting. And I think that, you know, more than anything, I just hope that people treat one another with kindness and with love, and that we continue to try and bring whatever small amount of joy that we can into our communities and into our world.
So true. Yes. So yeah, just so right, so true, and so right. Thanks, India. And Derek?
Yeah, you know, the time since October 7th has been, you know, maybe the most agonizing time of my life. Just the sense of powerlessness, seeing everything every day that's happening. You know, dealing with the political climate around it in the U.S. But the one thing that's been a real antidote or saving grace has been connecting with other people, you know, through Jewish Voice for Peace and all the different partner groups, you know, Muslim Public Affairs Council, Western New York, but made so many friends and comrades, you know, out of this. And it's been, you know, just a really sustaining, and I think we're building something that's gonna, you know, really propel into the future. I mean, I think we're building really a new movement around, not a new movement, but taking it to a new level, I should say, around, you know, justice for Palestine and U.S. foreign policy and connections between foreign policy and things abroad and at home. Yeah, and I would just say, you know, as a member of JVP, I think the American Jewish community is going through a great rupture right now. I think that, you know, for the past several decades, American Judaism was sort of kind of redefined to be very attached to Israel. At least that was the hegemonic, you know, form of it. And I think that American Jews, especially, you know, the younger generation, you know, almost half of whom don't support what's going on, are, you know, have to make a choice right now. Are we going to hold true to the values that many of us were brought up with as, you know, the children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of, you know, people who went through the horrific things that you talked about, the pogroms and the Holocaust, and, you know, kind of the universalist values and sense of justice that I think is very central to you know, Jewish culture, or are we going to, you know, side with, you know, and defend the indefensible? You know, what this far right Israeli government is doing, but really what the kind of, you know, project behind Israel has been, and how that's been utterly premised upon ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. And I think that, you know, I think we're seeing, as I said, a real rupture right now. And, you know, American Judaism looks a lot different now than it did a year ago or 5 years ago, and it's going to look a lot different in 10 or 20 years as well. So for people who are wanting to, you know, feeling uncomfortable about, you know, the attachment to Israel, you know, you don't have to support a Jewish nationalist state to be Jewish. You know, you can come to a group like Jewish Voice for Peace, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, thank you so much. Absolutely. People can come to Jewish Voice for Peace, Buffalo. So we're easy to find on Instagram. I'm also a part of it. And it's so important. And I really appreciate, well, what you all shared so much over this hour, and also just in your work and in working on these issues. What you were reminding me of, the principles and the spirit. And they're in all of our faith traditions. They're in the best of us. They're written in our hearts, and they're written in our very mouths. We know those things, so we know when it's right and we know when it's wrong. And so there's a lot of excusiology, as Jim Anderson would call it. But we know we can do better. We have to do better, and we're trying. So it's a spiritual struggle, and it's a struggle, but we're in it and we're doing it. I can't thank you all enough. You've just added so much, and I hope to see everybody on the 12th if possible. Meanwhile, there's so many other things that we're going to do, that we are doing together, and together we've been talking peace, and we've been talking peace in truth and love. Thanks so